Thank you guys for coming. I'm so excited to be sitting with this group of women. This is, there are so many worthy women in our industry to talk to. I'm so fortunate to be able to have this discussion with these four. I'd like to give a quick introduction to each one of them, and then we'll dive into our conversation topic. First, we have Jess Steffy. Jess is the owner of Square One Coffee, which is based out of Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and has retail locations in both Lancaster and Philadelphia. She's been working in coffee since 2004. She's a licensed Q grader, is the chair of the U.S. Competitions Committee for the SCAA, and she also does volunteer work for a nonprofit working with orphans from Kenya when she's not working with her own family with 2 boys and her husband, with whom she owns Square One. Next, we've got Mansi. Mansi joined the SCAA in 2008. She currently serves as Director of Membership. She's also the Senior Staff Lead to the Barista Guild of America Executive Council, and she's leading the Fellows Program in 2016 for RICO Symposium in Atlanta. She's also on the Board of Directors for Women in Coffee, the IWCA, and she is the proud mother to an adorable toddler. At the far end, we've got Sarah Kluth, who's Director of Coffee Operations for Revelator Coffee, headquartered in Birmingham, Alabama. Sarah has 17 years of experience in the specialty coffee industry, and her tenure has largely focused on sourcing management and green buying. She's also has experience from going through sommelier school, which refined her approach to coffee sourcing and tasting, and she's currently studying a Master's of Accountancy to contribute to her technique in sustainable management and meeting a bottom line. So thank you, Sarah. Lastly, we have Teresa Von Fuchs, who started as a barista more than half her life ago. Since 2008, she's been nose-deep in specialty coffee, and during that time, she's worked with the SCAA and the BGA on curriculum development and their growing certification programs. She's judged many barista competitions and worked with some of the best cafes and restaurants in New York City to help them make coffee as beautiful an experience as the rest of their food and beverage programs. She's currently the Director of Wholesale for Irving Farm Coffee Roasters. So, a pretty esteemed panel we've got up here. When Layla asked to have us come together for this conversation about the coffee professional, all of us exchanged emails about exactly how we wanted to focus the conversation. And basically what we all came down to, there were so many topics that we could have explored, but the one that we kept coming back to was risk-taking. How does risk-taking for women differ from risk-taking for men? What are we risking? Why are we afraid that we can't take that risk? We also wanted to talk about examples of the kinds of risks that we've taken. Teresa made a very good point in one of these emails. She said that owning your expertise could be a risk, which is kind of a startling thought, but actually really makes a lot of sense. Mansi wanted to talk about mentorship. Are there other women that you respect because they're risk takers, and what risks did they take? Layla wanted this entire event to be inspiring for women to be brave. And I think that for us to have a discussion about risk-taking really can get to the crux of that. So I'd like to open this up to the women on this panel to talk about, let's take that general question, how does risk-taking for women differ from risk-taking for men?
So I'm happy to start. For those of you who don't know me, I wasn't a coffee professional before I came and worked at the SCAA, and talk about a huge risk to come into an organization that's all about coffee. And you know, it's very intimidating because everybody knows these phrases and these acronyms, and people are throwing things at you, and you feel I think myself, I felt very like, oh my God, did I make the wrong decision by accepting this job? Am I like, kidding myself? But sometimes you have to put yourself out there. I learned quickly that, what I brought to the table was a unique perspective. I learned quickly that my expertise in building relationships was invaluable to the association. That's what we needed at that time, and that's how we actually managed to move forward in our membership. And part of that is just believing in yourself. So the risk was entering a job that you know nothing about, but then having the belief in yourself that you can do this. You know what you do best. You know how you do this. They're not different. They're the same professionals. They just have coffee in front of them. And so I really felt like what helped was, for me, in that risk of accepting a job and then totally just diving into the coffee scene was, one, I believed in myself, but two, I found somebody for the days that I didn't believe in myself that believed in me. And that is super important, I think, when you are taking risks in your life, which I hope everyone is taking on a daily basis, not like standing in front of a street that you're gonna get killed on, but, small baby steps, trying to get to where you wanna go to, and being, Haley talked about this, don't be afraid. I mean, it's hard to say that, but that's why you have somebody to support you. One of the best things that I will share that I experienced early on in my career in coffee was the passion that everybody has for the same thing. Everyone is super passionate. And what that really brings is a community together. Like, we really have a special bond with each other. And the moment that you recognize that you're not on the sidelines, you're actually part of the scene, that's when you actually can move forward and do what you're setting out to do. So that's an example from me.
Thanks, Mansi. Yeah, Sarah.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
All right. So you talk about risk, and immediately I thought, okay, well, what is risk, right? Risk, I think, can be defined universally somewhat across genders. Risk is essentially taking an action that could result in a loss of something valuable, right? I mean, this is not Webster's dictionary. This is just how I've thought this through in my head. But if you think about that, okay, so if that's what risk is, universally across the board, we all experience what risk is. We all experience this idea of, if I take this action, if I take action, it could result in a loss of something valuable to me. Well, that's where you actually start to understand the individual behind it, because what is loss? What do you consider loss? And sometimes it's ego, sometimes it's reputation, sometimes it's credibility, sometimes it's integrity, sometimes it's just skill. You don't know. But I think the important part about this idea of understanding risk and taking risk is understanding what is risk. What is that loss to you? Because I think sometimes too, the monsters we think that are under the bed, the skeletons we think are in the closet, aren't actually as big as we think they are. And I think if you take the time to reason through it and say, okay, don't be afraid. Well, what am I afraid of? And really critically think, like, what is fear? Am I afraid of someone judging me? Oh, wait, people judge me anyway. Am I afraid of someone talking about me? Oh, wait, people talk about me anyway. Am I afraid of this happening or someone laughing at me? Wait, that's happened before. And once you realize that what you consider to be loss and what you consider to be risk, or what you consider to be, going to hell and back, that you can actually survive it, and it's not scary anymore. You realize, wait a second, I could lose my job. Then I find another job, or then I rebuild my resume, or then I call my friend. And you figure out that actually risk, and like Haley was saying, it's still scary. Like, you still have that emotion of, oh crap, oh crap, oh crap, oh crap, oh crap. Like, that's not gonna go away. But the idea is, even though you have this emotion and this idea of fear tied to risk, if you can understand that the risk, actually there can be a strategy involved, and that the risk is in the loss that could be tied or associated with risk, isn't actually going to be a complete loss, that you can start again, or you can recoup, or you can rally and go again, suddenly it makes it all make sense to you, and you say, yeah, this is a risk still. It is. And I'm still scared to death about this, and I still think people are going to laugh at me and they're going to judge me. But I know even if that happens, I know I can get through it. I have this plan, I have this contingency plan, I have this person, and I have this thought, and I have this idea. So for me, that's kind of how I perceive the question.
Do you want to ask a different question?
Yeah, I'd love it if you and Jess would both respond to that.
I'm ready for anything. Okay. Well, I was going to say, I think you guys covered most of the important things about risk. So the only thing I was going to add that I think is useful is this idea, like Sarah's talking about building the difference between what are you afraid of and like actually breaking that down rationally. And that isn't just about risk, right? It's about all the sort of tactical moves we have to make in our career, in our life, and whatever. I think it's really easy to feel sort of overwhelmed, right? When you're ever approaching something new or even something you're really passionate about, right? There's so much. And I think sometimes it's to a disservice when you get really wrapped up in something and don't actually take the time to just methodically break it down. And I don't think that's a gender thing. I think it's a personality thing, but it does often fall along gender lines. Which is another thing that I think is really important to think about, is that a lot of the stuff we're talking about today isn't just because we're women, right? There's I know tons of men that skew in similar ways where they'll get in their own way in the same way that women traditionally get in their own way, or have the same sort of things. But thinking about who you are and why you do what you do is sort of really important, especially in that sort of, it sounds weird, but cold analytical way about like, well, what do I want to achieve? And then what am I afraid of? And then working it out from there. And then it becomes much simpler. And I think this, my comment in the email about owning your expertise is that, I think Haley talked about this too, about it is a tendency for women to always want to not put themselves first. And it is a tendency for men to always put themselves out there first. And I think that is one thing with, depending upon what you want to achieve, you have to do that risk assessment. And that is one thing I did really early, right? Like, I'd been a barista for tons of years before specialty coffee, and I came into specialty coffee back in 2008 after not doing it for a long time, and I was like, I can figure this out. I can do this. Like, the minute, like, people who had done this for years longer than me, and I would challenge them every time. And yeah, I probably looked like a jackass a ton at it, but it was how I learned, and it was because I wasn't afraid to put myself out there and make a mistake and then be like, all right, whatever, I'll figure that out. I'll do better next time. I think it's a huge thing that is hard to get your head around until you just do it the first time.
Yeah, so I don't have a ton to add, just sometimes, like what you're saying, being cold and analytical, naming the fear, like what do you really have to lose, and actually qualify it, quantify it, write it down. Like for me, 9 times out of 10, the things I lose sleep over or have lots of anxiety over, it's actually what I have to lose is like, maybe people won't like me if I do this. The likability factor. Oh my gosh, as an owner, when I have to tell someone to go scrub the toilet or do something, like, I want my staff to like me, but I also have to be the person I have to be in every, 50 million hats that you wear as a small business owner. Very few of them get me votes for Miss Popularity. So that's something I had to get over a long time ago, but I do feel like to stand up and ask for what you want, you tend to get in the way sometimes. And my childhood and my upbringing, so this is something me and my therapist are totally working through, so don't worry guys. It's gonna be fine. I'm on the path towards loving myself more. But I don't know, maybe this is a gender thing too, like the seen and not heard, minimize your existence, scoot over, get off to the side, don't get in the way. And I'm starting to get in people's way, and it's not as terrible as I thought it was, but I don't always win the popularity contest, and I'm starting to not care anymore.
Cheers, sister. I think walking into the room and owning what you're asking of the people that are in your immediate community is really half the battle. I mean, we always hear that about, like, if you can walk into a room, full of French scholars and just say a couple lines with enough confidence that you're going to convince the room that you know what you're doing. I think that's sort of what Jess is getting at in some ways, but also it goes to what she's saying, like asking people to clean the toilet. If you're a dude and you're asking your staff to do that, I'm not trying to make a huge generalization, but with women, yes, there is some, I don't want people to be pissed off at me when I do that. I don't want them to like, God, Jess is such a bitch for asking me to do that.
Or why is it when I send a serious email, I feel the need to put a smiley face at the end?
Exactly.
We had this conversation earlier. Like, if you follow Betches on Instagram, it's like, ooh, that sounded harsh. Better do an LOL.
Right.
Like, you shouldn't need to, yeah.
Exactly. This whole discussion is something that would be so great when we can open it up to you guys participating in it. But what I'd like to do before we do that, we've gotten really great philosophy from these 4 women about the way that they approach being leaders in their specific environments. But could you guys each give a specific example of a time that you felt like that you had some internal struggle with a risk, and then you took it, whether for good or for bad? Why don't you start, Sarah?
Everyone's like, nah. Anyone who knows me is like, nah. Yes. How much time do you guys have? Yeah, of course. I mean, honestly, so many times, and so many times where it backfires. And so many times where you have to, like Haley was saying, you're literally crying on the floor, thinking everything's over and thinking you have no credibility and you're not smart. And then you're like, no, intelligent people make bad choices too. Okay, all right, so maybe I'm still intelligent. I made a very bad choice. How do I recover from this? But there's also times too, in the field as a buyer, of course. Wherever you go, here in the United States, we have certain culture, and at origin, there's different cultures. Everywhere you go, when you interact with people, there's a different culture. In your own cafe at home, there's a culture. In your business at home, there's a culture. In Peru, there's a culture. In Ecuador, there's a culture. Burundi, And it's learning how to navigate that and learning how to observe the culture. And learning also, I think the biggest thing for me was learning what is personal and what isn't, and realizing that 99% of it wasn't personal. 99% of it was either culture or this or that, and had nothing to do with Sarah Kluth. Absolutely nothing to do with Sarah Kluth, and everything to do with the other person. And I think, the times where people are like, you're really beautiful. This guy offered 2 goats for you. And you're like, oh, wow, cool. Can I actually buy your coffee instead? There's that happens. But once again, that's actually not personal. That's that's not something to get offended by, and I could choose to be offended by that. I could choose to be like, I'm here to buy a coffee. Why don't you respect me? But no, that's not how it goes. That's not the culture. That's not how these people see the world. And so when there's interactions like that where you can choose to take it personally and take personal offense and see it for me as something as adversity or an obstacle to performing my job and doing international business, I can actually say, well, this is a situation where this is a cultural exchange. I'm coming from one culture saying, that's really kind of insulting. But they're coming from a culture saying, this is the best ever compliment I could give you right now. And so you have to, for me, I have so many, and even, in the United States, like I said, in this culture, I have plenty of stories and I could talk forever. But that was just something that, the first thing that came to my head was this idea of what I had to learn very quickly was that the times that I sensed that I was up against an obstacle, the times where I felt like I was pushing against the current, oftentimes wasn't a personal thing. It wasn't someone saying, Sarah, no. It was actually something much larger than the individual, much larger than me. And realizing that actually helped me understand it. And it helped me create curiosity rather than a reaction. And I think that's what helps a lot, is understanding, like, wait, what's going on here? Instead of reacting, why don't I become curious? Why don't I realize, like, wait a second, this probably has absolutely nothing to do with Sarah Kluth. It has everything to do with something way bigger. And maybe I should become curious about that and understanding that. And that's actually what helps with strategy. And that's what helps you, like Haley was talking about, watching the moves, watching the strategy, creating and understanding the environment. And so you can navigate that.
That's great. I'm just stuck on the fact that when I think about the times when I'm stuck in a challenging situation, and maybe some others can relate to me, it's hard to, I think you're absolutely right, like, you can't take it personally, but it's so hard, like, the first, like, hit is like, oh my God, they're attacking me. Why are you attacking me? Don't you understand my point? And then it becomes super emotional, and I mean, this isn't answering Sarah's question, but just talking about that, I'm just thinking, like, you know, what happens in my head is, like, I have to digest it, I have to talk to others about it, and then I have to just re-strategize, like you said, and try again. And gosh, that happens every day almost, I think. You know, both just at work, but also in just like daily life, like, you know, situations at home, and it's just about figuring out how to approach the person in front of you to get them to see, like, I don't want to say get them to see my point of view, but I want to be heard. And that's, at the end of the day, I just want to make sure that they understood what I was trying to say. And more likely than most of the time, I'm willing to just bend a little bit so that I can move forward and they can move forward. But it's just that importance of being heard, I think, is, for me, that is really important. So when we're dealing with risk-taking at work, a lot of times, you know, in our jobs, like, at least for me, like, I try to write out my points. I try to say, okay, I'm gonna bring up this point, this point, this point, and it's gonna make perfect sense. And then I'm at the first point, and it's like going all wrong. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna try my second point. And then it's like, I can feel sometimes, like, if I'm really passionate about something, the tears like welling up, and I'm like, I'm not gonna cry in front of this person. I am gonna get my point across. And sometimes it doesn't happen that way. And then I have to, like, go back to my desk and feel like, okay, what went wrong there? Why wasn't I able to communicate? And when sometimes I find myself super articulate when I'm super passionate, and sometimes it's like, that was not the way I should have said that. That was absolutely horrible. No wonder, you know, in this case, he didn't understand me. And so it's interesting, like, you know, when we talk about risk taking and putting yourself out there, it resonates with me that you have to just keep trying. You cannot stop at your first try. And that, I don't know, for me, that means a lot. And you know, if I have to, like, put posters up to remind myself to keep trying or whatever it is, you know, I just have to kind of remind myself, I'm doing this for a purpose, and I will get my point across in one way or another. It might not be the way that I envisioned it. And sometimes it ends up better than what I thought it would be. And so you have to give yourself that chance. But I like the advice of not taking it personal. I know that I'm working on that, but I do take things personally. It's hard.
I don't think that you're at all alone in those feelings, Mansi, at all. And definitely that's a set of reactions that tends to be associated with women, regardless of the industry we're in. I feel like a lot of what you just said is you putting a lot back on yourself. Like, you know, I mean, you wanting to, I want to give them what they want. I want to figure out how I can get my message across so that they'll understand it better, rather than, like, here's the message, I'm over here, you're over there, we need to meet in the middle kind of thing. I'm not trying to turn this into some sort of a therapy session, but it's because I'm totally in the same boat with you. Like, I do that absolutely in you know, as much as I consider myself a feminist and you know, a strong woman, these are paths that we were preconditioned to go down. In coffee, before you guys answer, I'm thinking, so a lot of us feel like coffee is a pretty safe place. We work with a lot of really open-minded, liberal men and women, but just addressing the men. Like we're working at companies that tend to be, you know, pretty awesome. I think so. You know, we're not in corporate America for the most part. We're very lucky. I feel like we're very lucky. And like what Sarah's saying, you know, if we find ourselves in a really shitty spot, like we do have the resources to get out of it and find a better place. Like this is an industry that has so many layers and so many connections that we do. I hope we all feel like we have a lot of options. But within those, there it's still, so Sarah's saying, you know, like when she's at source, you know, these situations might come up that aren't specific to her. They're just the way that culture might feel towards women, and it's just like, hey, you know, thanks, cool, those goats are awesome, but I just want to talk to you about buying your coffee, and then probably they're like, oh, okay, we'll talk about the coffee, hopefully. How about in specific situations? We work in, whether at your own company or committees you work within, or community efforts that you have where you're with people who you think are like-minded, but you still feel somehow pushed down in, I don't know, you're not able to express yourself as well as you want to.
Well, this sort of relates to the story I was gonna tell, if that's okay. Because I feel like it also relates to what you guys were saying. So just to come out with a good jackass story. So I had just gotten back into coffee, real new. Like I'd done my first like real SCAA-ish level 1 barista certification thing. And there was the first time ever like community SCAA classes being held in New York. Hopefully no one remembers all these people who were there. But anyway, and I was at the planning meeting for this. It's like my first meeting. I like just learned what SCAA stood for. And there was a bunch of people there and they were all deciding what to do. And I'm game for whatever. So I'm like, I'll wash the dishes, whatever I gotta do. But there were so many other people there who were like, yeah, my time's like super important. And so I'm not gonna do this shit for free and wash dishes. And so immediately when I saw that, I was like, well, my time's super important too. And so I signed myself up to teach level 1, having no business doing it. And I faked it fine because I taught the newbies, and you can totally do that. But the thing about this yeah, I did it. Sorry, everybody who's there on the internet. Anyway, yeah, but a couple things I learned from this, I feel like relate to both the things you said, is that one, there was a time when I was so over anxious about making sure that I knew the things or that I was going to get there, that I wasn't able to ask questions comfortably. Like I wasn't able to be curious because I was so worried about being like, yeah, I know this, I got this, I could take you. And that wasn't really useful. Like it would have been more useful to ask a lot more questions then. And it took me a couple years to be really comfortable to be like, oh, I don't have to know everything. I can ask all these amazing people who I'm around all the time all the questions. But the other thing about it is also like, yeah, putting yourself out there to make the mistake and realize like, oh, I could have done this differently next time. But also knowing the things about yourself. Because I think that, as Sarah's right, like you are kind of, when you talk about this, like how can I do this differently, right? Like sometimes it is on us. Like sometimes it's not about gender and it's not about all that stuff. Sure. Sometimes it sure as shit is. But it's like, sometimes it's just about our personality. But like knowing your personality is how you're gonna change or grow, and we should never stop trying to do that, regardless of whether it's a gendered idea about women are always trying to be better. It's like, well, but that's a good thing. Like don't stop that at all, right? Like if the point is to be heard, then yeah, work through it 10 more ways so that someone will hear you, even if it means like dumbing it down for them because they don't understand how brilliant you are. Anyway, but I really wanted to share. I I really wanted to share my jackass story, so I hope that's okay. Okay.
You could never be a jackass because you're so awesome. Well, coming from the place of, like, I felt some insecurity about being on this panel, for example, because I have not had any other job in coffee but owning my shop. So that's the end of my story. Goodbye. But it's really not. But the other thing is I have like huge social anxiety, like a lot. So to sit on a panel as though I have valuable insight takes courage for me, and so it's not an easy thing. To be asked by somebody to be on the cover of Barista magazine in my industry, like, what? Like, that's, like, I didn't sleep. Like, do you know how much sleep I lost? I was like, ugh. I didn't get to read the article. I was like, what's she gonna say? Is she gonna talk about the first night we met? Please, Lord, don't let her tell that story. Like, there's so many anxieties that I have, and all the voices. I feel like I actually hold myself back more than anybody else. So if there's anybody in my shoes out there and you're your own worst enemy and all the voices that no one else can hear are what's stopping you from, like, just give one less shit about what everybody else thinks. If you can just walk away from tonight giving one less shit. One less shit.
One less shit. One less shit. God, these women are like so amazing. I just want to like have them continue to run through with all the questions that I have for them, much less the questions you might have for them. But we have limited time, and so I would like to open this up to any questions whatsoever for you guys about, for any of them. Yeah.
So we talked a lot about like the fear aspect of risk. Is it more of a male thing to focus on the reward aspect of risk? I mean, do you want like statistical soundness? Yeah. Like, well, statistically, I think. I mean, once again, that's where I'm really hesitant to create. I mean, to put my caveat out there, I think for us to, I'm not about creating more division than there already is. For me, I'm all about, like, we're all humans. And I think, so there's that. And yeah, there's like individual trends, but I also think too, what I would argue is there's certain risks that I've taken as a buyer or certain risks that I've taken in my career, certain just risks in general. And once you realize, like I said, once you do that analysis and once you take that risk and the times that risk is successful and you pull it off, it is effing exhilarating. And your adrenaline is high, and you're like, let's do it again, and it's awesome. So I think it's one of those things too, where if you think about it, like I get your question, saying, okay, is risk taking and the idea of fear coming into play versus reward, which could be male, fear could be female based. I get what you're saying, but I would also argue maybe it's because the occurrence of risk-taking among females is lower. And I think maybe if the occurrence of risk-taking among females is higher, you would actually find more of a reward center there. Does that make sense? So that's kind of my initial response.
Yeah, my degree in sociology is just like that other degree I lied about earlier. Just kidding. What else? Questions?
Yeah, what other questions you got? Yeah, Brandon.
I don't want this to be a divisive thing, but
Sweet.
be divisive.
That's a great way to start a question. Do it.
Because you said that, and I don't, but I'm interested in what ways have dudes made it harder for you to be successful, and how can we not do that?
I can answer that right out the gate. You want an answer to that? I will. Well, just one example, and I see it from an owner's perspective when you're looking to promote or hire. Dudes' hands shoot up in the air at mad quick speed, lightning speed. You've been here for 3 seconds. You're volunteering to be the manager. Like, what gives you the confidence when I've got this person who's been slaving away and could run this with her eyes closed, but she doesn't have the confidence to put her hand up. Maybe she doesn't want the job. She doesn't have to want the job, but like if the dudes are the ones with their hands up fastest and most often, that's, as an owner, I can't make someone raise their hand either.
But I was going to say that doesn't mean don't shoot your hand up. That means when you're in a position of power, because shoot your hand up, right? But when you're in a position of power, right, look at the people who aren't shooting their hands up. Like look at the ways in which there are different, like how do we reward behaviors? Like I now manage people and I'm not super good at it. I've been learning like many things. It takes a lot of time, but it's like all the dudes who work for me are the first ones who ask for a raise. And the women who work for me never ask for a raise.
But that's
like,
the thing where I would, yeah, 'cause I've been doing a lot of reading about this. No, so, surprise, surprise. So actually, January 15th, there's an article published by the New York Times. This whole idea, like women make 79 cents to the dollar, right? So that's all around. But then the caveat was, okay, what corporations are doing, and a lot of businesses are doing, is saying, we're going to offer salaries that are non-negotiable across the board. So what's happening is the business owners and the people in the positions of power are creating systems and structures that are no longer based on the tradition of who raises their hand the most or who negotiates the hardest at the salary table. So I think that's part of it. I think it's part of understanding the people who are in positions that can create systems and create HR policies are doing so in a way that they're saying, wait a second, there's more women in the workforce than there ever has been. Traditionally, our negotiation patterns have been based on a largely male workforce. Well, how do we make this more equitable? Like, how do you make it more equitable? Well, you do this. You create structure to make it more equitable. So that's where I would argue that's where you can make proper structures in your workplace. If you're in that position, create a policy that says, you know what? We get this. There's a difference that we see. Let's create an even playing field here. So I think that's part of it. So there's a policy kind of idea to it. And then I think there's another, there is just an awareness, I think, for, yeah, you know what, honestly, like there's times where I walk into a meeting and it's like, guys will be like, you look nice today. It's like, I don't care. You actually look really bad today. Why did you, like, okay, we're actually here to talk about business. So I do think there's certain things that do, and you see it in the media all the time with actresses, like talking about, well, you didn't ask him that same question. And so I do think there's certain social norms that we've just become accustomed to, both male and female, because I would argue too, I do the same thing. I perpetuate gender roles. I say like, oh, you look so cute today. Like I do that too. So I think it's, understanding like, yes, we have gender norms and we have gender roles that we all kind of play into and we expect of one another. And that's just going to be how it goes because that's being human. But I think there's an awareness factor of being aware of what kind of, if you're creating a chasm or if you're creating a divide, if you are kind of, your comment actually catapulted the environment into kind of a power struggle or a control struggle, then it becomes a little weird. But I think for the most part, at the end of the day, like, why are we all here? Because we have jobs, right? We're here to show up to work, and we're here to show up to work together and to work hard together, right? So I think there's a certain part of understanding like, okay, you want to be aware of everyone's emotions. You want to be aware of who people are. But I think too, if you keep to the point and keep to like, we're here to work hard and work together, and you remind yourselves of that, I think that can be a really great basis for commonality and understanding. And so being men wanting to be aware of these issues, actually what you can start at is like, well, what is our goal? We're here to work and we're here to make great effing espresso, or we're here to roast really great coffee. Let's talk about how we do that together.
Well, actually, so that's a good point. Like, how do we do it together? Yeah. Like, and that's not even like the advice to men out there, like it's to everybody, right? Like teamwork is the most efficient way to run a business. And people who aren't in it for the team, who are in it for themselves, are often your weakest link. Yeah. And and they're often usually the hardest to find, right? But like to like actually find in that crowd of all the things that are going on in the noise and the emails. But like, yeah, like teamwork, like every business runs on it. So get excited about it.
I'll add one thing. There is, like, for men who find themselves that are leading women, one thing that I have had the privilege of working with are these leaders that if you're not a self-promoting woman and you don't like always find yourself like saying, oh, I did this and I did this and I did this, but you might be good on one-on-one situations, tell your leaders or tell your managers of the great things that you did. If you're comfortable one-on-one, but not in group situations, and the best thing that your boss, and I agree, it doesn't have to be male or female, but the best thing that your boss can do is also recognize you in front of the staff for that. You know, it makes a big difference. And coming from a position of leadership, when you're recognizing your staff, that's huge. It goes a long way. You might be introverted and you might be like, oh my God, why am I getting the spotlight? But still, that is helping you progress. And I think that if anyone is thinking about how to better their female staff, that's one thing that I have the privilege of experiencing, and it's been awesome, because you might not always raise your hand and self-promote yourself, but to have your manager or your boss do that, it goes a long way.
I just want to respond to a couple things personally, because some of this stuff I think that you guys have said, and I agree with you, Sarah, and I agree with you, Mansi, and Teresa, and Jess. Lorenzo is in my line of vision right here, and I'm just thinking like this is a guy who I'm making you blush. This is a guy who I know has the utmost respect for women in this industry. I will stake my life on the fact that he thinks that there are women out there that are as capable, if not more, probably, you know, that there are men who can do their job and women who can do their job, and everybody is just, you know, it's not like, yes, we are all equal, but we are all doing different things. Like, so sometimes, Sarah, when you said, when I walk into a meeting and someone says, hey, you look good today, that can be confusing. It can be, because we are all very intimate with our groups of peers in our work groups. I mean, we do tend to work in small, I work just with my husband, so he, yeah. But you know, these small groups of people, like, I'm gonna say, like, Sandy, your hair looks like fucking, it's rocking. But and I would say the same thing to Lorenzo. But I don't see the difference, and so that can be a difficult thing to distinguish. And I've always thought, and Layla will get to this in the next panel, like the competition, the competitive barista. Why are there not more competitive baristas who are women? The men aren't holding them down. The men in our industry are, by and large, really, really welcoming, who just, you know, yes, come, compete with us. There's a thing. Why don't women want to do it? And then I would like to share one personal experience, because in all of this stuff that we're talking about that is, you know, there are a lot of generalizations, and you know, I think we're all on the same page about a lot of stuff. But personally, in my life, in coffee, I've been around, I have my own company, but I work with a lot of different companies and go to a lot of events with a lot of different companies. And just last year, I was at an event with a bunch of super liberal, great people. You know, I never would have expected this to happen. Go into a room, all the seats are taken. I want to hang out with the people who are in the room, so I kneel down, and one of the dudes in the room says, "You look good on your knees." And that's someone who works for a company that we all love. And it's just, you know, this stuff can happen, and it does happen, and it's not, and they might think, like, Sarah, you know, she can take a joke. She's got the sense of humor of a 14-year-old boy, which I usually do, but not in this case. And so, you know, it's just, God, we all have to watch ourselves all the time. I'm sorry, I totally hijacked the conversation. Do we have any more questions?
No, I think, yes, well, and I think too, it's hard too, because you're absolutely right. It's a casual workplace. And you know, the same thing that, you know, our greatest strength can also be our greatest weakness. What is the greatest strength of coffee? We have a bunch of really creative, awesome individuals, and we're all really like emotional, and we love to give hugs, and you know, we like to talk about feelings and make art, and it's great, and I love it, and that's why I love coffee. But it's also, it creates a very casual situation where one time something's a really funny joke, and the next time you're like, I'm gonna strangle you. So it's tricky, and I think part of it too is, you know, as Sarah was saying, like, that's hard. Like, how do you teach every single person where the lines are? And I think as we grow older as an industry, you know, specialty coffee is so young. We're all so young. And I think as we grow older as an industry, we're going to learn these things, and we're going to learn sometimes the hard way with like experiencing kind of crappy comments or saying really crappy comments. And learning like, oh, shouldn't have done that. That was over the line. And learning what the line is and where the line is. Because our lines as an industry aren't going to look like corporate lines. We're not going to look like Deloitte or, you know, yeah. I mean, we have something called a barista camp. Like, you know, it's going to look totally different. And I think right now the industry in general is figuring out what those lines are and what is okay and what is not okay. And we're going to be a more casual industry, and that's what's great about this industry, and that's what gives this industry and its identity. However, I think as this industry grows and we develop and we mature as this really awesome creative industry, I think we're going to learn what those lines are, and they're not going to look like traditional lines, and that's cool and that's great, and I love that. But I do think we're in the process of learning what those lines are, and I don't think it's a hard and fast science.
No, but you know what? We have the opportunity to also say what those lines are,
Yes.
right? Like, I mean, it's up to us.
No one said anything. Like, there were other people in that room.
But it's not,
Okay, sorry.
you know,
Sorry.
no, but it's not about
The
doing
owner
it
of
from
the
back.
company who employed him schooled him.
Yeah. And
But
that's what's
who happened to be
important is
sitting
to
right there,
address it front on.
I was shocked. So I was actually shocked, speechless. So.
And that's why we need to support each other, because I think it's so important that you do find yourself, and I do as well, like, oh, shoot, I should not have done that because I just put myself in this situation. But that's why it's so important when somebody else is next to you to be able to stand up for you. And we have to draw those lines ourselves. I mean, we have to be able to say, that was not cool. I don't appreciate that comment. You lose your seat, and I get to sit there, and now you go on your knees, you know? Like,
Yeah. Well, no, that's all I was gonna say too.
Well, Sarah, you said it. As an industry as a whole, we are severely lacking an HR department. Like the whole industry, somebody should just centralize one for all of us, and we should just.
But we don't want to be. We don't want to be super corporate. Like, we don't want to vanillify our industry. We love our creative expression. However, that comes with.
Well, and we love that sometimes it's funny, right? Like sometimes really
Can be
inappropriate
funny.
is super funny. So what I think is important, but this is what I think is important, is that I also am usually the mouthy one who will like come back with the comeback. But I've been shocked speechless tons of times, and I've counted on other people to be in that room to be like, is that cool? I don't know if that's cool, right? Or if I watch that happen to someone else, like I now become the unlikable person. Like it's nothing like being like the downer, right? But be like, maybe that wasn't cool, and maybe you should find out if that's cool, right? But that's on all of us, because our industry is going to evolve, but like it's always going to be full of 22-year-olds, always. And so which is cool. That's going to keep me young. So it's like, how do we help each other always in those rooms to teach people, you know, how to be funny and inappropriate and goofy and keg stand at a work event, and then but then know how to judge the feeling in the room.
yeah.
When that line is there.
Yeah, and also like having a casual workplace it's not permission to cross boundaries. Right. And I think there's a challenge to also be that safe space for
Right.
like I know I was touched inappropriately by a coworker, and I felt safe, like actually telling Dawn, and she validated me, and And it's like, what do you want me to do about it? You know? And I think that's important too. And I don't think having a casual profession is permission. Or, like, because to me that sounds like victim blaming. It's like, once I have a workplace, get used to it. You know?
That is a fantastic point. It really is. And guess what? I'm so sorry. We are like already way over our time, but can I say that what this discussion has shown me is that, boy, howdy, do we have a lot to talk about. Layla and I have already talked about having more events like this, one in tandem to SCAA, one in Dublin, maybe in New York Coffee Festival. We're going to have a lot more events like this, and we're going to touch on these topics in a lot more specificity. So, God, what a great conversation to have just begun. Thank you guys so much.